I'm Marcy Miranda with Free Speech TV, and I'm here at Harvard University about to interview Professor Lawrence Lessig. He's the director for the Saffer Center for Ethics here at Harvard, and he's done a lot of work around campaign finance reform most recently, as well as intellectual property. Thank you so much for being with us today and taking time to chat with us a little bit about the work that you've done.
Glad to be here.
Let's start off talking a little bit about Creative Commons and copyright law. This is where you got your start from. How did you get into that initially?
Well, around the middle of the 1990s, as I started doing work about the internet and policy with the internet, it was pretty clear we were going to see kind of perfect storm of culture policy, because on the one hand, technology was inviting people to engage in all sorts of sharing and creativity of work using the internet. And on the other hand, the law was increasingly regulating that activity and making it so that every time you did something, you needed a license from somebody to be able to do it. And these two trends were going to meet in the middle in a way that either weakened copyright fundamentally or weakened the creative activities on the internet. So what we thought was we needed to find a way, a simple way, to make it easy for people who wanted to mark their creativity with the freedoms they wanted it to carry, to do that in the context of the internet, so that people could begin to share and build on creative work and do the sort of things that the authors wanted them to do without worrying about the nightmare of copyright on top.
How has this changed creativity, this idea of copyright and what you can and cannot do in remixing?
Well, there's still, of course, a pretty important struggle that goes on between the content industry and people who want to share work freely without the permission of the copyright owner, what they call piracy. But Creative Commons is really not so much interested in resolving that struggle as it is in encouraging a wide range of authors and creators to release their work or make their work available under licenses that clearly signal the freedoms that they want their work to have. So for example, as a scholar, I don't make money from people copying my articles. I profit by people spreading my ideas. So I want my work out there as broadly or as pervasively as possible. So using copyright to restrict the distribution of my work makes no sense for my own business models. Creative Commons tries to give people who have a different kind of business model this simple way to signal and to encourage people to share their creative work. The most important lesson is that people having access to and the ability to build upon and use your work is the central way in which a huge range of creators get compensated. And that I think is the thing that we have to recognize, that they have that choice. They ought to be able to exercise it in a way that conforms to their own view of what they're trying to do.
So let's talk a little bit then about the transition that you've made recently into campaign finance. How is it that the two are sort of bridged? How did you come from one to the other? Because on the surface, they don't seem to be all that similar.
The work that I'd done around intellectual property policy and the internet had this institution building component, which was Creative Commons, but it also had a reform component, which is we never thought Creative Commons was copyright reform. What we thought it was a kind of hack of the existing system, and we needed to find a way to get copyright reform to deal with issues that you couldn't really address through something like a Creative Commons project. Most people, ordinary people, began to recognize the need for this change. Teachers and parents, businesses, these were all people who began to see the way in which the old system didn't work in the context of digital technologies, and they had a commitment to try to build a new system. But policymakers, congressmen, didn't even have a clue that there was a change necessary, or even that there was another side to the issue. And that was for the obvious reason that the public domain doesn't have a lobbyist who shows up inside of Washington and channels all sorts of money into into congressional campaigns. And so it began to be obvious, it's not a hard point to recognize, that we weren't going to get any reform about this issue until we began to get reform about the more fundamental issue of influence inside of politics. And not just for esoteric questions like copyright, but for fundamental questions like global warming legislation or healthcare change. All of these were areas where this corruption of the political influencing system makes it impossible to get sensible policy. So this is the issue that I thought I needed to spend some time working on.
Since you've come, to Harvard and sort of had this transition, have you seen more lobbying for intellectual property issues in Congress? For example, SOPA. That was something huge that just occurred. How is it that it seems like we've started to see a little bit more of that, on the political end? Do you think that's a fair assessment?
Well, it's certainly the case that the lobbying by the content industry to change copyright law to, in their view, better protect their interests has continued to grow. And SOPA and PIPA were meant as a culmination of a long campaign that had been waged by the content industry to bring a pretty fundamental shift to the basic way in which copyright on the internet was regulated. But what we saw, quite to their surprise and to my surprise, frankly, was a rise in the opposition to that lobbying from a grassroots movement in the context of the internet. People on the left, people on the right, businesses, non-commercial entities like Wikipedia, a whole bunch of people recognizing the way in which this change was going to be fundamentally damaging to very important values of the internet. And they banded together and were able to produce an enormous amount of influence inside the system and basically stop this change in its tracks. To the total astonishment, I think, of the copyright industries, I think to the complete astonishment of the lobbyists inside of Washington. They'd never seen anything like this before. But I think it's optimistic about what the potential of the internet is for intervening and affecting policy.
And the internet's playing such a crucial role in this grassroots organization. Do you think that's a fair assessment as well, in using these new technologies to really make change and almost give people back, the power?
Nobody yet has a clear understanding of how much potential these social media have for bringing about what is really a fundamental change inside of political systems. It's not that change is just what happens in the digital space, but the digital space certainly enables organization and collaboration in a way that was extremely difficult before the internet. And in all sorts of places where that could be helpful, we're seeing it take off. So the Arab Spring, organizations of anti-corruption movements across the world, in India and in Spain, and Israel. And I think that we see the same thing around certain policy issues in the United States. So I expect we're going to see much more of that. And the question whether it can actually ever have a really fundamental effect is still an open one, because I think that these movements have to figure out how they can coordinate and recognize the need to coordinate among groups that are very different. It's not like everybody has the same political views, but they have to find a way to focus on what they have a common ground on, if we're going to ever find a way to use these tools to achieve a really significant change.
It seems like we are so inundated now with money in politics. We see it in super PACs. We're seeing it clearly, in this 2012 election year. Is it possible to pull back from how deep we are? And if so, what will it take?
So it's only possible if these outside movements, these outside waves of energy, like in the SOPA, PIPA fight, can coordinate to try to bring about the pressure necessary to demand that kind of change. I actually don't think it's possible on the inside anymore. I think that the system is too invested in things staying the way it is, that it really would take extraordinary energy from the outside to really push and make that change happen. So this is why I think it's important that these outside movements begin to find a way to coordinate or to build an alliance that could aim at what is a common thread of a problem that both sides face. And I do think the kind of corruption that we have inside of our system is the issue that both sides should be able to agree upon.
Is the old model going to work, signing petitions and protesting, that type of activism? Do we need to look maybe to the web to seek out new types of activism, getting people involved? What can people physically do?
I think the critical thing is to begin to get people to focus in a way that ordinary politics doesn't try to get them to focus. Rasmussen does a poll about the top issues, and corruption is always number 3 of the most important issues that America thinks about. But the politicians don't want to talk about corruption because they either feel hypocritical or they don't think it's corrupt. So they're not going to talk about the issue, which means it's going to be left to people on the outside of the system to try to force it back into the center. And we can do that by building a large number of people supporting the idea of this kind of reform, and increasing the number of people who demand that each politician confront it and force every issue to be analyzed in terms of it. And I think after a number of years of building that kind of movement, we can get to a place where it's impossible for them to ignore the issue anymore, and they have to begin to address it in a way that would be effective.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons that we at Free Speech TV believe so strongly in what we do and encourage people to call in and continue to support independent media, not only so that we can talk about these issues, but also so that everyone can sort of be informed and we don't live under the same clout and under the same covers of the corporate media and kind of what they're feeding us. Would you care to talk a little bit about the importance of independent media and how it can be a player in this?
Yeah, so it's critically important. If you look at the arc of influence that happened around the Occupy Wall Street movement, there was a period of pulling together recognition of what was happening and its significance that was supported only by basically independent media, things like Free Speech TV, entities that were interested in listening for a different heartbeat of social activity and amplifying it. I think that one of the things that is so debilitating in public discourse right now is that the commercial pressures on both the MSNBCs and the Fox Newses of the world drive them to be extremely predictable and polarizing, because it's a very effective way to drive attention and excitement to their base. And so having channels where this pressure is not as strong or is differently tilted becomes critical to begin to imagine a media that could produce a citizenship ideal that could actually bring about the change that I think we need to see in the democracy.
Mm-hmm. Do you believe in a need for media reform itself, and do you see that as, if that were to occur, that might also play a role in, campaign finance reform overall and just getting people more informed and more educated and making some of these changes? Yeah,
well, so media is being reformed. It's being reformed by a radical new range of competition. So that the age of broadcasting or the age of channeling, channels in the sense of things that channeled people from one thing to another, is gone. It's no longer the opportunity of anybody, whether it's the government or a station or anybody, to just broadcast an idea in a way that everybody gets confronted by it. I don't think we have any clue about how to produce the right kind of discourse in the non-broadcasting, non-channelizing media world. So I think we're going to have a period of media reform, which is first about figuring out what the architecture of this looks like, and then where to intervene to produce improvements in what's actually being produced.
Yeah, even broadcast media, I think, is sort of strange in the way that there's technically a public domain, public airwaves, and people kind of monetizing off of that in certain ways. Yeah. I know that's something we at Free Speech TV deal with. We're trying to get onto more stations, but there's a lot of pushback, and we are little guppies in the sea of broadcast media in particular, because there's so much money.
One of the ideas that's always been fundamental in my thinking about media is liberating more resources for ordinary consumers or ordinary citizens to be able to use and build upon. So the idea of public radio should, in my view, be radio which produces material which the public owns and is allowed to take and do with as the public wants. Mm-hmm. These are resources the public should have, and they should be encouraged to become participants, creators, remixers in that space. And I think that dimension of media reform is often just lost.
I want to talk a little bit more about the 2012 elections and what we can expect to see. Talk a little bit about what you've been seeing in this race, just on the GOP end, and then how you think the Democrats will come in down the line when we're closer to November, and just how that's going to play out.
Well, I have been a supporter of the issue that Romer is talking about being a central issue in this campaign. And when he decided to run as the Republican nominee, I'm a Democrat, and I'm pretty confident I'm going to be voting for Barack Obama in November. But when he was a candidate in the Republican primary, I was extremely supportive of the idea that the issues he wants to talk about, which is money in politics, the corruption of this system, needed to be right at the center of the whole election, but let's start in the Republican primary. Mm-hmm. And I was astonished, and I think nobody in his campaign actually even dreamed that he was in no debate. He was not permitted to participate in any of these debates, even though objectively he was the most qualified candidate. He had been a governor, a 4-term congressman. He had run a bank for 20 years. So, he was kind of Herman Cain and Newt Gingrich in one candidate. But despite the fact that he had these qualifications, he was not permitted to be on stage because basically nobody thought that somebody who had committed himself to taking no more than $100 from anybody and who would have no super PAC and no PAC money at all could ever win. So if you can't win, why would we take you seriously? So this issue was nowhere in the Republican debates. Not one of those candidates wanted to mention this issue. What I'm fearful of is that nowhere in any of the presidential campaigns will this issue be an issue. Because again, Obama naturally should be able to pick this issue up. It's certainly what he believes and certainly what he made 2008 about. But I think it's uncomfortable for him to make this an issue because I think people properly ask, well, what have you done about it? Not made any proposals to make any changes that would make the system differently. So if you're not going to make any changes, then why should anybody believe that this is really a genuine issue that you care about? So I want this issue to become an issue Americans can rally around. The presidential election is usually the place in which such issues get displayed, but I'm fearful this time it won't.
Why do you think it is just overall that he's been hesitant and kind of distanced himself and not really said one way or the other what he wants to do and where he wants to go?
I think that there was a very important and I think mistaken judgment made in the Obama White House early on that their objective was to just kind of win on the policy grounds and not reform the system. One can respect that position, but Obama set a very different position up. It was about changing the system. I think that it was a mistake for them to give up that commitment because the failure to maintain, to stick to that commitment, I think led many people to think, well, where's the change in this administration? We could have gotten strong policies towards the Democratic side by anybody. We wanted you to be in there to fix the way the system functioned. After he took, quote, the shellacking in the 2010 election, his first press conference after that said, we were so eager to get things fixed that we didn't fix the way things get done. And I think he needs that kind of opening to begin to say, okay, now we're going to really take up this issue. So it's grotesque, the amount of money that's being raised in this cycle by the tiniest slice of Americans. We need a way to change the system, and I'm going to give you a plan, and then let him lay out the plan that really is the way to change this system.
Now, you yourself and other activists and academics have worked on ways, organizations that people can start to do that. I have Root Strikers, one I know that you've worked on. Talk a little bit about that, your role in it, and what you hope can be achieved by this group and other groups like it.
So Root Strikers gets its name from the quote Henry David Thoreau, who in Malden writes, "For every 1,000 hacking at the branches of evil, there's one striking at the root." And so the intuition here is people have got to get to recognize that every single issue they care about has this common root. And we're not going to make progress in healthcare reform or in global warming legislation or in simplifying the tax system until we attack this root. And so Root Strikers' objective is to find ways to knit together that understanding in a wide range of communities so that more and more people sort of come back to the ground where they say, yes, this is the problem, and we've got to find a way to attack it and make it work. What I do in Root Strikers is to try to find ways to push that message, to pick issues where we can push it, and to do as much as I can to make it a central frame for people's understanding about American politics. I think the critical thing is to give people a vision of what would be a fix and why we why we need that fix and what the steps are to get to that.
Do you think this is a step in the right direction in being able to tackle some of these issues? More people going online, more people using independent media to get their stories, more people not just sort of buying into the usual stuff?
Yeah, I think it is. Many people walked away from the victory in the SOPA and PIPA and saw it as not just a victory on the substance of that issue, but a recognition of many people of the way that money had corrupted the system. So I think that the more cases like that we can rally people around, the deeper this recognition is, and there's more then to tap in as we're going forward and trying to find a way to solve this, fix this problem.
Do you think there's hope that SOPA and PIPA will come back in some form down the line? It seems like for now, you know, they got shut down pretty quickly because they saw the power of the masses, but is it gone for good?
I think that if its ideas come back, it'll come back in a different vessel. You know, one astonishing thing in that exchange was the way that Chris Dodd, who was the head of the Motion Picture Association of America and a former senator from Connecticut, very well-respected senator, after the defeat, got on television and said something which basically made as crass a connection between money and results as one could make. You know, basically said, you know, when you needed our support, we were there with our money. Now you need our support, you know, you got to worry about whether we're going to be there with the money, making it quite clear that this was a kind of quid pro quo for policy exchange. And that was astonishing, both because it was so crass. I mean, certainly that kind of understanding operates, but usually people are not so open about it. But it's also self-defeating, because now what senator or what member of the House could change his vote in the face of that kind of threat? Because now it's, oh, you're only changing your vote because you're afraid of the MPAA. So I think that they really shot themselves in the foot about this particular round, and they're going to have to find a way to move this legislation into something else.
If you could, you know, manipulate the powers that be or change things so that campaign finance reform was possible, what would that look like? What would the limitations be? Yeah. Who would be allowed? What would the issues of transparency be like?
So the critical first step is to recognize what the problem with this system is. And the problem with this system is that we have a Congress who's dependent upon their funders, but the funders are not the people. So congressmen spend between 30 and 70% of their time raising money to get back to Congress or to get their party back into power. And as they do that, they develop a sixth sense, this constant awareness about how what they do might affect their ability to raise money. So they become dependent upon these funders, but the funders are the tiniest slice of the 1%. So 0.01, the 1% of the 1% give more than $10,000 in an election cycle. So in that world, Congress is obsessed with how to keep its funders happy, but its funders represent a very small slice of America. Well, the solution then is to make it so that Congress, when it's dependent upon its funders, is dependent upon the people, meaning make the funders the people. So we've been talking about, you know, voucher-like programs that would make it so that every voter would get a voucher, and the voucher, let's say a $50 voucher, they could give to a member of Congress or a candidate for Congress who agrees to fund his or her campaign only with vouchers, and let's say contributions of up to $100 on top of that. That would be a system where $7 billion would be added into the political market. $50 a voter is $7 billion. That's 3 times the amount that was raised in 2010. But the money would be coming in small chunks, so that nobody could believe that it was, you know, big money from the richest of Americans that was driving policy. Policy would be driven by what voters wanted, because the voters would be the funders.
And where would the money come from, I guess, on those vouchers? Would it be people saying, here's my $50?
No, so the idea is you rebate the first $50 of tax revenue that everybody gets, and that rebated money then is the source, the base, for funding this program where people have vouchers that they can then give to members to fund their campaigns.
That really does seem innovative in the sense that it brings back so much of that money and that power to people.
Yeah, which is what democracy is supposed to be.
One power, or one person, one vote. Yeah. We've gotten so far from that. I am astonished at the fact that such a small percentage of Americans has so much power. Who are these 1% of the 1%?
They're a mixed bunch. You know, certainly some of them are just wealthy people who have a vision of the public interest, and they're trying to use their power to bring it about. But I think the point is not so much wealthy people versus people who are not wealthy. But the real problem comes from people who have access to an enormous amount of money, who are trying to use their access and influence to change government policy in a way that benefits them. When you've got people giving hundreds of millions of dollars in these super PAC campaigns to eliminate environmental protections, which would benefit their company because their company wouldn't have to pay for the environmental cleanups that are required because of the current regime of regulation. Those are people who are just leveraging their money to get a better return on their investment. And that dynamic has grown dramatically. And as it grows, it increasingly weakens people's sense that they have any connection to their democracy.
Thank you so much, Mr. Lessig, for being with us today and chatting with us. We appreciate your help and your support.
Great to be here, and good luck to Free Speech TV.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Marcy Miranda. I'm here in the halls of Harvard University where I just finished speaking with Professor Lawrence Lessig. He's one of the co-founders of Creative Commons. He's done tons of work with intellectual property, and now he's out to ensure that democracy is alive and well. If you like the types of programs that we deliver, the types of documentaries that we deliver, the different live events that we've done before, and even exclusive interviews like this one with Professor Lawrence Lessig, give us a call. Make sure that we stay on the air. It is more important now than it has ever been to have your support and to know that you are doing what you can to make sure that we stay on the airs, that we continue to give you the information that you're not going to see in other places. And now independent media is suffering more than ever. We need your support. Give us a call at 1-877-378-8669 or donate online securely at freespeech.org. Lawrence Lessig spoke to me about the importance of campaign finance reform and ensuring that one vote by one person isn't corrupted by the power of money. And that's not the kind of information that you're going to get on mainstream media. It's the kind of information you'll get here at independent outlets like Free Speech TV. And that's where we need you to come in. Make sure that independent outlets like Free Speech TV continue bringing you the type of stories you're not going to hear, the types of issues that mainstream media is not talking about, like campaign finance reform. But we need your help. We can't do this without your support. Give us a call, 1-877-378-8669, or donate securely online at freespeech.org. If you like Democracy Now!, Thom Hartmann, Al Jazeera, the kinds of documentaries that you don't see in any other channels, we need your help. Give us a call, 877-378-8669, or donate securely at freespeech.org. Now more than ever, we need you to join us in the fight against corporate media. We were one of the first networks to bring you coverage from Occupy Wall Street. We had Laura Flanders out there talking to people, and we've got our show, Occupy the Media, which deals with all the issues surrounding Occupy Wall Street and trying to tell you how it matters to you, how it impacts you, how you, the 99%, are impacted by the policies and the media of the 1%. If you value independent media, show us your support. Give us a call, 1-877-378-8669, or donate securely online at freespeech.org. If you like Democracy Now!, Thom Hartmann, Al Jazeera, original programming like Occupy the Media, give us a call and show us your support. Now more than ever, we need you to showcase that you're behind us in the fight against mainstream corporate media. We want to bring you the issues that no one else is going to talk about. We want to be the media for you, the media for the 99%, but we need your help to continue doing that. So give us a call. Pick up the phone, 1-877-378-8669, or donate online at freespeech.org. Professor Lawrence Lessig and I spoke about the importance of independent media for a rich and lively democracy, and he believes, just as much as we do here at Free Speech TV, that you're not getting the issues that you deserve to hear about from the mainstream media. It's independent media outlets that bring you issues that Occupy Wall Street is covering, that Democracy Now! Is covering, that Thom Hartmann is talking about. But we need your help now more than ever to make sure that we continue bringing you those issues. Give us a call, 1-877-378-8669, or donate securely online at freespeech.org. $60 a month, $10 a month, $5 a year is all we need. The amount does not matter. What's important is that you continue to support us so we can continue bringing you the issues that you're not going to hear in the mainstream media. Issues like campaign finance reform, like intellectual property, the types of issues that Lawrence Lessig has talked about, the types of issues that are going to impact you as a viewer, as an American, as a voter. But we can't do that without your support, so give us a call, 1-877-378-8669, or donate securely online at freespeech.org. We would love to continue bringing you these types of exclusive interviews with progressive minds that are making a difference, that are all about democracy and ensuring that your voice is heard. But we can't do it without your support. Now more than ever, independent media needs you, our viewers, our watchers, our fans, to come out and show us that you care about us. Give us a call, 1-877-378-8669, or donate securely online at freespeech.org.